A Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Haidt says, for example, that liberals misunderstand conservatives more than the other way around, and that while conservatives see self-sufficiency as a profound moral value for individuals, liberals are more focused on a public code of care and equity. What do you mean, righteous mind?
Anytime we're interacting with someone, we're judging them, we're sharing expectations, we think they didn't live up to those expectations. So in analyzing any social situation, you have to understand moral psychology. Our moral sense really evolved to bind groups together into teams that can cooperate in order to compete with other teams. So some situations will sort of ramp up that tribal us versus them mentality. Nothing gets us together like a foreign attack, and we've seen that at 9/11 in Pearl Harbor. Conversely, when there are moral divisions within the group and no external attack, the tribalism can ramp up and reach really pathological proportions, and that's where we are now. So there are three major historical facts or changes that have gotten us into the mess that we're in. So the first is the realignment of the South into the Republican column, which allowed both parties now to be pure, so that now there are basically no liberal Republicans matching up with conservative Democrats. So the parties are totally separated. Second thing that happened was the replacement of the greatest generation by the baby boomers.
Greatest generation fought World War II,
That's
came
right.
home, built the country, ran the economy, people's politics, and created this consensual government you're talking
Exactly. These are people who joined groups, had a sense of civic responsibility, participated in the democratic process. And so these people, as they moved through, I mean, they could disagree. Politics has always been contentious. But at the end of the day, they felt they were part of the same country, and in the Senate and the House, they were part of the same institution. They're replaced by the baby boomers. And what's their foundational experience? It's not responding together to a foreign threat. It's fighting each other over whether this country is doing evil or good. So you get the good-evil dichotomy about America and about each other happening in the 60s and 70s. When these people grow up, assume political office, now you got Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. It's a lot harder for them to agree than it was for Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan.
So we get to the culture wars, fights over
That's right.
abortion, prayer in schools, and,
That's right.
and that conflict becomes very polarizing.
Exactly.
So the greatest generation disappears, the boomers come along, the civil rights fight divides the country, and the third one?
The third is that America has gone from being a nation with localities that were diverse by class, in particular, let's say. You had rich people and poor people living together. It's become, in the post-war world, gradually a nation of lifestyle enclaves, where people choose to self-segregate. If people are concentrating just with people who are like them, then they're not exposed to the ideas from the other side from people that they can actually like and respect. If you get all your ideas about the other side from the internet, where there's no human connection, it's just so easy and automatic to reject it and demonize it. So once we've sorted ourselves into homogeneous moral communities, it becomes a lot harder to work together.
Your research in the book, and you and your associates, organizes morality into 6 moral foundations or concerns. Sketch them briefly and tell me how liberals and conservatives differ on each of them.
Sure. So if you imagine each of our righteous minds as being like an audio equalizer with 6 slider switches, and the first one is care, compassion, those sorts of issues. Liberals have it turned up to 11, and we have this on a lot of different surveys. Liberals really feel it. When they see an animal being mistreated, they're more likely to feel something than conservatives, and especially than libertarians, who are very, very low on this one. The next 2, liberty and fairness. When liberty and fairness conflict with care, are you going to punish someone, or are you going to be compassionate? Liberals are more likely to go with care. In other words, care trumps liberty and fairness, even though everybody cares about all 3 of those. The next 3, loyalty, authority, and sanctity, what we find across many questionnaires, many surveys, and analyses of texts and sermons, all sorts of things, is that liberals don't talk a lot about loyalty, group loyalty. They don't talk a lot about authority and the importance of order and authority in maintaining order. They don't talk a lot about sanctity. Conservatives, on the other hand, what we find is that they value all of these more or less equally. And I think this is part of the reason why conservatives have done a much better job of connecting with American morality and convincing people that they are the party of moral values.
You have a lot of photographs of both the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street that get at how moral psychology divides us. Just
That's right.
walk me through
Sure.
some of these.
Sure. The first step that we all need to take is to understand that the other side is not crazy. They're not holding their positions just because they've been bribed or because they're racist or whatever evil motives you want to attribute. So what I'm hoping my book will do is kind of give people almost a decoding manual so that they can look at anything from the other side, and instead of saying, see, this shows how evil they are, you say, oh, okay, I see why they're saying that. All right, so let's take stop punishing success, stop rewarding failure.
I remember seeing that at one of the early Tea Party rallies.
So that's one version of fairness. Fairness as proportionality.
What do you mean?
Well, if people work hard, they should succeed. If people don't work hard, they should fail. And if anyone bails them out, that is evil. You should not bail people out who have failed, especially if it's because of lack of hard work, something like that. So as the right sees it, government is evil because it keeps punishing success with redistributive policies, take from the successful and give to the unsuccessful, and it keeps rewarding failure by giving out welfare and other payments to people who aren't working. So what I've found is that fairness is at the heart of both Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, but because the words have different meanings and they relate to additional moral foundations, that's why they're really very, very different moral views. There was a lot of empathy and caring at Occupy Wall Street. So this sign, I can't hurt another without hurting myself. This is part of the ethos on the left. This is why you get a lot of Buddhists and sort of the Christian left. It's a lot of emphasis on care and compassion. When they talk about fairness, it's in particular fairness that will benefit the weak and the poor. So here's a sign, marching for the meek and weary, hungry and homeless. Tax the wealthy fair and square, as though, because they're hungry and homeless people, it's fair to take from them and give to them. Now, I think there are really good arguments for why we need to increase tax rates on the top, but simply saying some have and some have not, therefore it's fair, that's not a moral argument for most Americans.
Does your research suggest it's preferable to have a greater moral range?
When I began this work, I was very much a liberal, and over time, in doing the research for my book and in reading a lot of conservative writing, I've come to believe that that conservative intellectuals actually are more in touch with human nature. They have a more accurate view of human nature. We need structure, we need families, we need groups. It's okay to have memberships and rivalries. All that stuff is okay unless it crosses the threshold into Manichaeism. So I think that it would be very difficult to run a good society without resting much on loyalty, authority, and sanctity. I think you need to use those. Liberals see some aspects of where the social system breaks down, and conservatives see others. You have to have consequences follow on bad behavior. That is as basic an aspect of system design as any. And that's one where conservatives see it much more clearly than liberals. And I think I'm a centrist in terms of liberal conservative. And I feel like I sort of like stepped out of the game. And now that the game has gotten so deadly, I'm hoping that in the coming year I can be the guy saying, come on people, just here, understand the other side so you stop demonizing, and now you can argue more productively.